So thank you everyone for being with us this afternoon. And we're here to represent Code Computer Love as part of the MediaCom Transformation Week. We were invited to talk about something around this theme, this topic of transformation, and we decided upon or landed upon tweaking to transform as a kind of narrative for like how we think and also some of the work we do and how we believe transformations should really take place. All transformation is different, of course, but there's a certain way we try and do things if we can. My name's Steve. I look after new relationships and business development at Code. And I'm joined today with my colleague Dave. You can say a few things, Dave. I'll let you.
Yeah, sure. I thought you were going to give a bit more of an intro about yourself there, Steve.
Oh, no, that's about it. That's all you need to know.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Heath. I'm Technical Director at Code. I've been in the tech business for over 25 years, originally developer. And I guess the interesting thing is that where we are now in 2021, roll it back over 21 years. And I think that's when I built my first mobile site. It was actually the first mobile recruitment site that you could get on, if anyone's, I'm showing my age now, but Matrix films, when the people had the Nokia and the flip down phone. We were building mobile sites for those phones. So that was like one of the first mobile recruitment sites I ever launched. So that was kind of my claim to fame originally. Since then, been in .coms pretty much, and I've come to Code to continue trying to bring .com methodologies and agile lean methodologies into our customer and client relationships. Ultimately, to try and build better, sustainable, adaptable solutions through modern engineering, but with a customer-led approach. That's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, excellent. I think, I suppose, given that I'm the sort of often the first person people speak to, I get to hear a lot of different business challenges. Speak to a lot of different businesses who are, approaching it in different ways. So yeah, there's a little bit of that in this as well, I suppose, in terms of different ways in which you might think about going through the various stages of transformation yourselves. So some house rules. So open your chat window. If you want to ask questions as we go, that's great, and we'll do them at the end if that's okay. This will also be on YouTube later, and yeah, mute yourself, although it sounds like Yan's actually muted everybody until later anyway. But feel free to fire up your camera and show us who you are. That'd be ace as well. So yeah, it's and me and Dave are going to talk through a few things really. So do feel free to like just chip in. It's not supposed to be some sort of monologue. So do be free with the questions, please. That'd be great. And we'll try and leave 5 minutes at the end for questions. So a tiny bit about Code and our role within group. So we're Code Computer Love. This is like us in our natural environment when we're there. We describe ourselves as being a digital design and products and service design studio. We're based in Manchester, and I guess been part of MediaCom now for about 6 years. Our role within group really is to bring in a couple of things. One is around customer experience development and expertise. It's around engineering the right platforms in the right way, which is Dave sort of alluded to there. And also, it's also really to sort of maximize the value of the media spend that a lot of the media clients are spending. If we can create a much more convergent and converting experience online on behalf of the MediaCom clients, then that's a great thing, driving effectiveness through conversion. So that's why we're in group. It's been a great journey so far, and yeah, we've got lots of clients in common, and yeah, onwards and upwards really in terms of where we go from here. So very quickly on us and how we think really. So this is how we think about the world. So we recognize that like everything is an experiment really. We don't really know what's going to work and what's not. So like we have to be mindful that we are in a constant evolution of making something that we think is the right thing to do, but also mindful that we might need to change those things based on market feedback, based on data, in order to make the business or the things that we're doing sort of future-proofed and ready for the next thing. That's also a recognition as well of a changing shape of the relationship with the client itself. Often we'll come into businesses where they perhaps looking to just transform their organizations in some way, looking to modernize their approach to digital, put digital far more in the center of decision making. And so we also help organizations reorganize to some extent around the digital propositions that they've got, create different ways of working, ultimately to sort of ship better products to the end user and have a far more effective business unit sort of back at base. So that's what we kind of do for a living. kind of firmly planted within the digital transformation space, really. And here's some of the businesses we work with. Lots of different types of business in different markets, ranging from the wonderful Hillary's to people like British Cycling, where we're helping them with their membership proposition. People like Swinton Insurance, where for the last sort of 7 or 8 years we've looked at like refining their conversion strategy, and a whole bunch of other things. We're actually only one of 7 BBC design and UX rostered agencies as well. So we've got pretty good credentials in the UX and design space too. So it means that we've got lots of different types of business that we work with, and therefore we've got lots of different experience to draw down from. But in terms of transformation then, so coming back to the task and the sort of the topic, what we don't think of it is like this. So we don't think of it as being everything. I think if you have like a wholesale transformation, it's really, really hard to get that through. It involves too many people, too many stakeholders, and too many moving parts. I think what we try and then refine down is, instead of it being about everything, then can it just be about a valuable thing, or the thing that we see the most value from doing? If we were to have a change event, then what would it be, such that it changed the customer experience, it drove some more value into the organization, and it made us some more cash. Those are the things that we try and bring everything back down to, so it's not so overwhelming and we can actually move through things quickly. And it's actually about changing your belief system. So if you think about that, then, so if you think about, actually, it's not about everything, it's not about grand scale changes, it's actually about being far more scientific and slightly more specific about the problems that we're about to solve, then you have to have a different mindset. You can't go into a process, arguably, that has wholesale change in mind. You have to think about specifically what are the problems that we're going to define here, that we are then going to go away and create solutions around, rather than sometimes a lot of businesses have a predefined idea about what they want from a process, and ironically, and sometimes sort of jumping over the problem space altogether, actually, often accidentally. We also then think about experiences. So what do we do to create a customer experience that gets somebody from here right the way through a process, and then a successful exit or conversion for that person, rather than does it look a certain way, or how is it designed? Moving away from design and thinking much more holistically about an experience someone has, and not just digitally but also offline as well, and also what that impact is for the design of the service that the organization has to deliver as well. Projects, projects don't really exist anymore. Projects, really should be considered more like, a product that lives and breathes and never really stops changing. Projects are often sort of limited by time and money, and therefore can become sort of a compromise, really, when it comes to the end of those things, without a sort of a holistic view of the vision of the organization. And a few other things here, which I won't go into too much, but I guess it's about looking at the value in all the things that you could be doing. Where's the value in the things we should do, and worry less about doing everything on our to-do list. But a lot of it's about behavior change, and I think that's a lot of the work we do is step into that space with our clients, really, and do so together. Often we'll work together with clients alongside them, so that we're bolstering their teams in certain ways, and we're working genuinely as a team to get things done.
It's worth probably adding that that manifesto that we had on the previous slide, it's something that Code, this is our manifesto, this is what we believe in. It's something that helps us change from being kind of more of a traditional digital agency into being, as we are now, a product and service design consultancy. That's helped us understand how we need to think and act as a business every day, and ultimately this is the heart of everything we do. And so it's something that right at the center of all our relationships, that businesses are coming to us to try and obviously think more on the left rather than on the right. And that's ultimately, like any manifesto, is where we value ourselves, and are we regressing, are we maturing across those different areas of our manifesto.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. And what isn't transformation? Well, we don't think it's about technology. I think often you kind of have a vendor-led approach to technology or transformation, which we don't believe in. We think it's much more about seeking those valuable things to change, doing so at pace, and ideally doing so sustainably, so that in the future you can adapt them and move them on as and when the market shifts or the business changes. You can still reuse those things and not have to kind of go back to the drawing board and start all over again. So transformation is just seeking out valuable things to change and do so at pace.
Yeah.
So try and bring it down to some like really tangible things, really. So seeking valuable things then. So tweak to transform then. So we've got 3 candidate examples here of the kinds of things we've been doing over the years with various clients. And all of these, I suppose, are a recognition of that moment where there's something here that's not right. What can we do to change it? And we go about doing so at pace so that we can extract the value from it. We can learn as we go. And ultimately, create a better experience for the customer, but also from a revenue perspective, actually drive revenue into the organization. So we're going to talk about these 3. We're going to major on Manchester Airport. So Matt came to us a few years ago and they were looking to reinvent the airport, and they wanted to sort of outsource, create like software as a service of an airport, if you imagine, sort of a white labeled airport experience. And they wanted to be much more than just an airport where you sort of arrive and you take your flight to and from various places. They want it to be a much richer experience than that. But they had nothing. Like, this was us literally. There's Dave on the left. Dave, hadn't realized you were on that picture. This was us going into MAG on the first day. They had an aircraft carrier, which is the aircraft hangar, excuse me, which is this thing here, and not a huge team. Which, Dave, do you want to elaborate on sort of the infrastructure they had at the time?
Yeah, well, they had a kind of an old team which was largely leaving, exiting, kind of because of old technology, old practices. And Manchester Airport Group, or MAGO, was the clean, fresh arm of the business that they wanted to create. And there was no people apart from three VPs at that point who wanted to set a vision, and the walls were covered in vision and aspirational statements and how we want to act, behave, become. So they kind of like wanted to become a fresh kind of, not constrained by years and years of legacy and I guess old practice. They wanted to, like Co-op Digital, like other businesses, reinvent themselves in a new way. So effectively, they had nobody. So this is day one, trying to understand where they want to get to, and then ultimately, yes, it's about building something, but it's about how to get in there, embed a culture, an employee proposition, having the right technology, but also technology that's going to adapt to a different changing market. Because let's face it, everything changes within seconds, so we must be able to adapt and change direction easily without having to be stuck with box technology. So it was really exciting that we're right in at the start of this. How do you set a business culture? It was very exciting.
It was. They also had a sort of slightly vendor-led approach to that as well. So sometimes, as we talked about earlier, big transformation piece equals a big box product. Sitecore was the one that they were talking about at the time. So that's the context of the environment. No real people, great vision, and then maybe a vendor-led approach. They were looking for this new website that was going to be the kernel of this transformation. They've got lots of legacy tech to deal with, lots of invested stakeholders across public sector and also private sector, and also this desire to become self-sufficient. So they didn't really want to be incumbent on anyone really to drive out their technical strategy for any longer than sort of 18 months. So those are the kind of ingredients that we found ourselves with the airport. And looking at the airport as it was, so this was the homepage at the time. It's a good candidate for change. I think you'll agree. Most people looking at that will think, yeah, that's not a modern estate. Let's get a new one. That's the kind of attitude I think from some businesses, is when things look quite so dated, then it's just like, let's just get a new one. Let's just do it all. Let's just get a fresh one in. But we sort of asked them to step back from that, I guess. And because we didn't want to go wholesale with the change, we didn't want to have a big bang release. There's a lot of bad things can happen if you sort of change everything at once. You don't quite know whether you've had a good or bad impact. And if you have, then where did it come from? It's hard to distinguish. Plus, what it's not doing is looking at the value of the organization. If you just change it because it's not pretty or it doesn't work particularly well for the editors or the stakeholders, then we're not looking at the value that it needs to add from a digital perspective, a digital strategy perspective, into the bottom line. And that's what we needed to do with MAG. So we brought it right back to this. And these are the 3 ingredients that we use a lot when we look at our clients' businesses. So is there an opportunity where we can change the customer experience markedly for the user, and it becomes a beautiful thing that is, ideally world-class or market leading? Mm-hmm. Is there a way we can do that and build something in sustainable tech that isn't a massive undertaking of rolling out a big old thing like Sitecore, for example? We could do so in lean tech, so we can stay agile in the future. And also, importantly, can we see where there's going to be commercial return from having done all of this? Because there's no point in making it better for everybody and actually, commercially, we're no further forward or sometimes even worse off. And Marks and Spencer's famously, about 8 years ago, they replatformed, spent about 5 million quid. And then they fell off the face of Google, I think, and lost about 8% conversion overnight because they hadn't done any user testing. But anyway, it's important to come back to basics and come back to being really specific about why you're doing these things. And so we always drill our sort of our relationships in these conversations like this. And it came back to car parking. So the most important thing of an airport for commercially is the car parking estate. That's where they make a great deal of their revenues. So that became our how might we statement in the first place. So how might we maximize the commercial opportunity of online parking reservations? So you see, we've quite quickly gone from it's all about everything into actually no, it's not. It's about maximizing the commercial opportunity around car parking. So we've really zoned in on a problem statement. So parking looked a bit like this, and again, it looks like a really good candidate for change because it's not arguably a very modern experience. We ran something called the design sprint process, which this one is a slightly elongated one because what we did was we threw some more production sprints at the end to actually design some assets and get some pages live and so on. For those of you who don't know, design sprint is just a really rapid way of experimentation over a very short period of time to get a candidate design or user experience in a handset, typically in front of customers, and get them tested. So this involved us going up and down Terminal 1 at Manchester Airport to get some real feedback from real people who were taking holidays. But also it kept our blinkers on from a time and cost perspective. We had a very specific amount of time and money to understand whether or not we could actually improve the parking experience. This is how we create hypotheses for change. So doing all that research, doing the data inputs, doing the expert reviews and the marketplace, etc., creating those reasons for change, and then we're into experimentation, development. Sometimes it's just in tools like VWO. Sometimes we'll do light touch HTML changes, depends on the client and the objectives there. We're always learning and improving from that process and going around again. We do it collaboratively. So with people on the left, I think are people from MAG, and the guys are on the right are from Code. And so everything we do really is around like using the thought leadership within the client, but also bringing our expertise to the table from a digital perspective, always working collaboratively. The agency doesn't disappear and do something for 2 weeks and then come back with some ideas. It's not about that. It's ultimately our client's business, and we're helping them make it as good as it can possibly be. So big believers in collaborative working. Right, and this is the first sort of foray into changing it. So you'll see quite a lot's changed here. We've changed the pre-book now and stripped it right back. We've got some nice sort of messaging underneath in terms of parking options. Unfortunately, it lost 8% of conversions, so actually performed worse than the experience on the left, which was a bit of a surprise for everybody, to say the least. So we went away, we did some more research, we did some more testing with users. We refined it again. If you might notice the change there, we've got some logos underneath the arrivals under the entry and departure dates, where we brought some trust markings in and some iconography and made some very subtle changes. But actually, that changed things significantly from a conversion point of view, and suddenly we were up at 4.6% increase in parking sales, which actually meant something like £500,000 of incremental revenue over annualized from that moment onwards. So effectively what they'd done was they'd taken a transformation brief, they'd condensed it into like a 6 to 8 week program, and they'd made £500,000 and they'd solved one problem, one explicit problem, rather than get lost in the weeds about trying to transform loads of things all at once. And so that's the takeaway from me on that. It's razor sharp in terms of its objective and its commercial outcome.
Yeah.
And we bought no technology. No technology was bought for that. We didn't need to buy Sitecore or anything else for that. In fact, we just did it in static HTML, I think. Just conscious of time, Dave.
Yeah, it's cool.
We're going very quickly now. And so you carry on, you keep experimenting, you go round and round, and parking evolved over time from the left there across to the right. And we just keep learning from the experience. But the good news is we've got commercial return, we've got money in the bank, we can start to invest in other things. We can start to think about the brand and how we can overhaul that. So coming back to the overarching website and the transformation that they wanted across that, we can then start to create pattern libraries. So we can then roll out some new conventions around the IA and the way in which we look at templates. Sitecore was back on the table at this point. It's like, do we or don't we do Sitecore? They actually turned it into, Sitecore was actually a swear word within the business. True story. So very much they'd seen the value in being far more alliterative and far more specific about software and the role it plays in defining the UX. So they moved away from Sitecore. Yeah. And then we started to talk about loosely coupled architectures, which Dave, I'm going to give you 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's fine. So ultimately, when we talk about digital, we think about digital estate, CMS, and that's why Sitecore was in a square box. How do we do this so we can separate all the systems that we need to, so we can iterate faster at the front end website, but content management is largely a non-issue anymore. It doesn't matter, it's not connected. Then we can think about APIs in the middleware and customer engagement, best of breed customer engagement tooling. But it's really important, if you go on to the next slide, Steve, that we not only think about the digital footprint, but we think about the larger technical landscape. So the architecture that we work with Manchester Airport on was thinking about the bigger technical landscape, ultimately, because this is where you get you get more scalability and you get more adaptability. If you only think about the web, then ultimately it becomes a silo on its own. So you've got to think about how it plays in the bigger ecosystem. So ultimately, all our relationships are about the bigger technical ecosystem, because that's where you start to really be able to transform a business through not only through digital tools, but by operational tools and connecting in all their third-party and business systems.
Awesome. I'm going to skip that one, mate, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And so we go from having this everything approach to like, just let's look at the valuable thing. What's the next valuable thing? And what's the next valuable thing? And we just carry on changing the things that we know are going to drive an incremental change to the customer experience, the technical strategy and the technical stack. How can we increment around that? But also what's going to drive commercial value back into the organization, and we just carry on. And that's how we transform organizations. In this relationship, we had an exit plan. So over time, we literally did less as they did more. It wasn't a case of handing over at the end. Mag just took over and we just started to drop people away from the team. So that was a really lovely way to sort of phase across from a responsibilities perspective.
Yeah.
So they went from this warehouse, which had no one in it, to having an office full of folks that were a product mix of people from design and through engineering and data and so on. Yeah. So a great success story for them as an organization in terms of their growth planning. And then from like an investment perspective,
Steve, just a great product culture as well. The processes, practices and technology approach is really created an employee proposition, but it also embedded that culture into the business that allowed them and started them off in the right direction. So that's from a transformation point of view, sets them off absolutely in the right step.
Yeah, totally. And then just in terms of like return on investment, like I guess because we were always solving problems as we went, then we were seeing a commercial return quite quickly on the work that we were doing. And then just by stark contrast, if you imagine spending money on a big box product like Sitecore, not to pick on them particularly, or anything really that's a monolith that you're spending a lot of money on, you can be spending a lot of money before you even begin to start to see a return on investment. So I guess that's another reason why we prefer to use these agile methods, because they are just in the interest of the client and not in the interest of the vendor.
Yeah.
And they made £7 million in that first year by virtue of various things, not just parking, obviously, but a great story from a commercial perspective. Highly aware we've got 5 minutes left.
We started a bit late as well.
We did. Are we okay to go over by 5 minutes? I guess people will leave with their feet if not, but I'll keep going and assume that that's okay. So the second one is around JCT 600, which is a major car dealership in the north of England. It's £1.2 billion with an organisation that you've never heard of, which is fascinating, I think. And of course, it closed over COVID. We've been working with them for 6-7 years now on the UX and design and some of the implementation around the car sales journey. And so clearly, if you can't open your showrooms, of which there are over 50, then that's a problem for your business. So we had to then create digital showrooms effectively and take the salesperson out of the equation when it came to re-engineering that relationship. So again, coming back to tweaking to transform, what we looked at here was where are the parts of the sales process that are highly manual that happen in the showroom that we can start to digitize and throw on the internet effectively. And so these are some of the things that we did. So license checking online would typically be a face-to-face conversation. We took that away and we did that as a digital thing. Reserving online was a new initiative because we couldn't physically get to the showrooms. All of this was all on the understanding really of the customer experience. So where was the value in the car selling process? Understanding the sales process itself, like how does somebody physically sell a car to somebody, and then unpicking that to understand where we can take some of the manual effort out of it and create a digital intervention. We introduced things like finance sliders for users to use. So again, you might be negotiating a finance check in the showroom. You can do that now online, again, just to remove that friction from the buying process. Things like driving license checks. So again, you would bring your driving license into the showroom. You'd have to check it there and then. You can do it in advance, and actually you could be sort of ready to go. You can literally get the key from the salesperson and drive the car away almost immediately without having to do any of that paperwork.
Internal, kind of based on internal efficiency improvements. So they were losing about half an hour to an hour for every test drive. Ultimately, that's a staff member that can't sell cars. So we digitize that process so someone can essentially be already walk up, literally just pick the keys up when they turn up for their appointment, and drive off. It just means that the operational improvements, because the margins on car sales are diminishing. So that's not just a value, it's an operational value.
That's right, mate. And also nice things, like nice sort of customer experience, little perks really, like, what's your drink preference when you come in. So yeah, thinking about, the emotional state that people are in when they're buying a car, and just making it a nice sort of soft landing when they get into the environment itself. And so that's only been going for about a year or so. So it's a bit of a working process to some extent, but already we've seen great take up from most of the dealerships. Over 100 hours a week is saved in administration for the salespeople, which is a massive amount of time they can now be focusing on selling cars and not doing paperwork. And it's a very specific number there. 361 hours saved for customers on completing the license check task alone. So again, as a person buying a car, you're not having to sit in front of a salesperson or a computer or something just filling out forms. So you can get on with buying the car. So again, in terms of tweaking to transform, I guess it's all about recognizing those moments of friction in the sales process, pulling them out specifically, and then engineering a digital intervention around that thing and then plugging it back in. And the last but not least, by any means, is Hillary's. We've been working with Hillary's for, I think it's over 16 years, which is a huge amount of time. Specifically, there was this problem that we recognized within appointment setting. So within Hillary's, you go online and you suggest 3 appointments that you would like to have someone come around and measure up and give you some samples and give you some advice around the design and so on. We're finding that was restrictive for customers. Often they couldn't have the appointment that they wanted. By the time the sales team rang them back and said, okay, you can have slot number 3, then either they were too busy or actually all 3 slots had already been taken by somebody else by the time that exchange had happened. So it wasn't happening, and it wasn't particularly fruitful. We also recognize that 51% of users don't get their first choice appointment, which of course everyone wants. They don't really want the second and third ones. So the idea was, if we show real-time availability of our consultants in the local area based on postcode, then actually that will drive a better return and a better conversion. So that was the problem to be solved, really. So we went from the left here, which is the 1, 2, and 3. You can see on the left in terms of day and time availability, and then we switched it into a far more intelligent API-driven live data diary availability checker, which gave people specific availability slots that they could then choose. What did this do? Well, it meant that when Hillary was really, really busy and they didn't have any availability in the live diary, they could actually turn the old one back on again to offer just the 3 slots, and then they could make a phone call and maybe negotiate a different time. So from a call center management perspective and a lead management perspective, it gave them more flexibility for how they might go about that. But also when they're particularly busy, you can see in the red zones there, people want they want slots after work. So it meant that if they did get that phone call, they could then try and push people into a midday appointment if they knew that there was high availability for people in that area, knowing that people would prefer to have a later slot using the online tools. And then we knew about the minimum recommended slot count for live diary. And so they could change the business rules in the booking system to show people how many there were. So you can give them scarcity, or you can give them lots of different choices depending on the rules or the ambitions of the sales team at that time. So again, it just gave them huge amounts of flexibility, but also drove huge amounts of conversion through to those visits in the first place. And here's a nice quote from Emma. I do believe she said this. I'm on record now. But I think the point really here is around, this was a as much as this was a tweak to transform, this was very much a multi-team effort. So this straddled marketing into operations, into IT. In the Hillary's business, it forced them into doing different things with SAP and some other complicated technology they hadn't done before. So and it created new ways of working that didn't exist before. Because I think, again, in terms of transforming things like this, you have to have a holistic view of it across different departments, and you have to come together to make them happen. And I think it's been testimony to the relationship that it's had a great outcome. And I think some of the, I think the headline was a result on that, just from showing real-time availability. I think it was driving some near on sort of 2 million quid worth of extra incremental revenue in the first year, which was an amazing result. So again, tweaking the way in which you book an appointment online from having a static view to being a dynamic view, it drove a significant amount of cash and of course improved the customer experience exponentially. So rushing, and it's 2 minutes past, so I've already failed. I'm really sorry. 3 things to take away. I think it's all about looking for those opportunities to add value, whether it's in the way in which things happen within the business from a behaviors perspective, whether it's about the customer experience itself. Think about those 3 things where they intersect around a high value thing that will drive a lot of money, a thing that will improve the customer experience significantly, but also an opportunity to try some light tech. Don't think about technology as everything. Think about using tech very, very lightly, so you can experiment and keep things pacey, which is the next thing. Always have a mindset of building and learning and measuring the things that you're doing. Don't just ship and forget, come back to it, see how it's performed and revisit it. If it hasn't worked, be honest about that. Tell the business, this is what we're doing. It hasn't worked as we'd hoped. We're going to go again, and get there with it. Just keep going with it and learn from the data and learn from speaking to real people about why it's not working. And we'll keep it moving. And the last one is choose tech at the end. Like the Manchester Airport one's a great example of where we didn't even buy any tech in the end. Sometimes we remove tech from a business and it performs better. So having a tech first approach to transformation is not a good idea in our book. So yeah, make sure that you're choosing tech at the end, and make sure you're making a technology decision that's sustainable and agile in the future, because we don't know what the future is. So have an agile approach to technology, and that's as good as you're going to get, really, in terms of transforming for the future in mind. There's a thing we do called a Day Zero workshop, which if any of this is of interest to you, or you're struggling to get through it or anything like that, then we've got a sort of a well-trodden way of getting these things on the table in terms of finding opportunity. So feel free to lean into that if you want to. Follow us on Twitter and all the usual social channels. If you want more of this, that'd be great. We haven't got time for questions, but if anyone's still here and wants to ask questions, of course you can. I'm very, very sorry for going over time, but we did have a lot we wanted to talk about, and hopefully 1 or 2 things has resonated with you whilst we've been talking. Dave, anything from you?
No, you said it perfectly. I didn't need to be here, but yeah, if you've got any questions, please shout up by all means. If anyone wants to hang on for a minute or so. If not, we can end it there, but just throw your hand up or show your face and ask a question.
Thanks, Leon. Very kind. That's okay. Great. Well, thank you for everyone for your attention. It's going to be online later. I'm sure we'll send a link out to that if you want to go through it in detail or whatever you want to revisit it. I know we did go through it at some pace. But yeah, we're a friendly bunch. If you ever want to speak to us about anything, here we are.
Cool. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. See you again.
Bye.
Bye.